Dr. Brian King is a trained neuroscientist and psychologist, and for the past decade, he has traveled the world as a comedian and public speaker. By day, he conducts seminars nationwide and has attended all kinds of events. Thousands of people have seen him speak. He's talked about positive psychology, health benefits of humor, and stress management. By night, he practices what he teaches in comedy clubs. Dr. Brian King began performing stand-up comedy in the Bay Area, and he's performed at hundreds of shows around the world. He's also the author of the book, The Art of Taking It Easy, and also The Laughing Cure. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that we can turn it over to Dr. King.
Am I on now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Megan, for that awesome introduction. And thank you for putting my book on screen. A little thing about, I don't know if you are aware of this, but quarantines kill book sales. Like my book came out maybe a couple months before this, and it was just starting to catch momentum. I was doing okay, and then all of a sudden just dropped. You know, I do talk about it quite a bit. Also, I do go by Dr. Brian King. It's not necessary to use my title. I just use that as a screen name, or my Twitter or my Facebook or all that other good stuff. I just go by Brian, really. I'll tell you, I've never been comfortable calling myself Dr. King. It's a name that's been taken. Usually there's some laughter there. I know. That's I got to give it up to Kasha for being able to perform comedy without the immediate feedback from the audience. As a comedian, you know, I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I normally, you know, I perform clubs, I perform different venues, but I'm one of those comedians that likes to interact with the audience, and I'll say, hey, you in the front row, blah blah blah. Hey, you there, you know. Yeah, you can't do that with Zoom. So I haven't actually been doing any of the virtual shows that other comedians have been doing, but that was pretty awesome. And I gotta say, almost inspirational. After watching Kasha and listening to her, I think I might have to reverse my decision on that and start doing some of these virtual shows that I'm invited to perform in. So I'm a comedian, but I'm also a psychologist. And again, as you mentioned, I have training in neuroscience. I have been touring the country, telling people how to manage stress and telling people about the benefits of humor and laughter. And so this is something that I've really devoted a good chunk of my career to. You know, I just want to get a little bit into why humor is so good for helping us to manage stress. You know, there's a couple things I want to go ahead and share, and these are things that that I don't really, I don't think I need to tell people, but it's worth mentioning to sort of build a case for laughter and humor. And one is, of course, is that humor helps distract us. You know, it helps distract us from things, the negativity, the difficult circumstances that we're facing and so forth. So we use it as a distraction. The actual act of laughing, and I know some of the other guests that you'll have on later will talk about this as well, but the actual act of laughing has an effect on our physiology in that it reduces stress hormones like cortisol. You know, our blood pressure goes down when we start laughing. It helps to calm the body, physiologically speaking, and so those are all great benefits. And those benefits actually lead me to conclude that probably if there was a purpose that we could ascribe to laughter, the purpose of having this mechanism, this behavior that we engage in, is to help us to manage stress. Now, we're not the only animal that laughs. There's lots of animals that laugh. Other species laugh. You know, dogs laugh. It's been well documented that dogs laugh. You know, I'm a dog person. I love dogs. I think they're fantastic. And, you know, to me, it was not really that surprising to find out that dogs laugh. You know, they seem like they got a good sense of humor. You know, they're playful, they're fun, they're good-loving, good animals. They tell me that cats laugh, and I just don't believe it. Cats are jerks. They are just jerks. They're terrible, terrible human beings. It's a good thing they're not human, actually. Somebody said, Lily, yes, dogs do laugh. We can't hear it. Human beings can't hear it. When they laugh, it's actually inaudible to us, but we can measure it. We have machines that can measure it. We have devices that can record it. We can even play dog laughter back to them, and they will respond as if they're listening to laughter. Just like Kasia mentioned, laughter is when we hear laughter, it sort of triggers something in us to want to laugh or want to find something humorous. So the fact that other animals laugh, the reason why I bring this up is because how was the dog laughter recorded? You know, I forget. I honestly, that's one of the details of a study that I haven't thought about in a long time. But the reason why I mention that other animals laugh is because I like to point out that there's something adaptive to laughter. You know, it's a behavior that predates human beings. You know, we're pretty sophisticated with our use of humor, but we're not the only species that uses it. You know, I didn't mention chimpanzees, but of course they laugh and they make humor and so forth, all the way down, even rats. Rats laugh, which I think is pretty amazing, actually. Rats laugh. And I actually got into this research way after getting my PhD. And I got my PhD at a place called Bowling Green State University, Ohio. I later found out that rats laugh, and that research was actually carried out. There's some laughing rats. Are they tickling? Is that Yak? Is that Yak's video? I don't want to talk about it, Scott. If you're going to talk about that later, I don't want to talk too much about it. But I was just going to say that I went to the same university he was doing that research in. I was 3 doors down from him, and I had no idea that he was in there tickling rats. If I would have known I could get my PhD in rat tickling, I've been all about it. Yeah. But anyways, so laughter is nature's stress management tool, as I like to point it out. From a cognitive perspective, I like to mention why having a sense of humor is so essential to helping reduce the effects of stress. You know, not even just the physical act of laughing, but just being able to process information in a different way. I wrote a book, and we started off by talking about it. And I read a book called The Art of Taking It Easy. And in that book, there's a subtitle, How to Cope with Bears, Traffic, and the Rest of Life Stressors. These are, of course, common everyday things that we have to deal with, right? Bears and traffic being essentially common. No, bears are not very common. We don't get attacked by bears very often. We do find ourselves in traffic very often. The reason why I chose those two different examples to illustrate how stress affects our body and how stress affects our psychology is because they are very different, but yet they're processed by our brain in the exact same way. So one thing that's really important for people to understand is that stress, by the way, I notice every time I lean forward, this balloon comes into the camera. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. It was my daughter's birthday like a few days ago. We had to celebrate birthday in quarantine, and there is actually a whole lot of balloons on the ceiling. I don't know why that one keeps coming into frame every time I get close to it. It's almost like I could pluck it, but I can't necessarily get the other ones. Anyways, I'm distracting myself from my own presentation. So the reason why I talk about bears and I talk about traffic is because they're both very, very different situations, but they help to illustrate a single point. And that is that our stress response is a means to deal with threat. And that's it. That's all stress is. That's it. Whenever you feel stress, whenever you get stress, it's because your brain has convinced itself, that your brain has perceived that something in your environment is a threat, is some kind of threat to you. Now, I use the example of a bear attacking, and I don't just, that's not just a nice bear you see at the zoo or a circus, whatever. And I'm talking about a bear charging towards you. You know, imagine there's a bear, you know, in the distance running towards you who intends to do you harm. You know, that bear is a serious threat to you. Your perception of the charging bear as a threat is a valid one, right? That bear will tear you up if it catches you. You know, that bear will do some serious damage to you. You know, there is a valid perception that you are under threat, but it is still just a perception. I do like to point that out, and that's going to be important because I want you to understand the role of your thoughts on how your brain processes stress. On the other hand, let's take traffic, right? Traffic is something we all find stressful. Occasionally, I'm not saying we all get stressed all the time. Although right now, I got to be honest, this quarantine is awesome for traffic. Serious. The gas is like 30 cents a gallon where I am, and there's no traffic. It's wonderful. You know, too bad there's no place to go. That's the worst thing about it. I talk about traffic because it's something we all experience, and almost all of us have at some point been stressed in traffic. If you've ever been stressed in traffic, I would like you to think about something and realize this about that situation. That traffic was not a threat to you. It was no threat. At no point that morning did thousands of people wake up and get together and say, okay, today we're going to make Megan late for work. You know, that never happens. It never happens, you know. And also, you know, it's not an actual threat, but something about the experience makes us perceive it as, you know, Megan, usually I use the name Judy for that joke, but because I'm looking at you, you know, I threw Megan out there. You do look like you would be the threat. So for something about that situation tricks our brain into thinking that it's potentially threatening, you know. And so let me think about what that is. First of all, whether it's being attacked by a bear or finding yourself just driving into traffic, right? You don't enter that situation in a vacuum. You don't, you don't enter that situation as a blank slate. You enter that situation with a whole bunch of pre-existing stuff already in your head. You've got a head full of stuff. You've spent your entire life accumulating stuff, cramming it into your head, and now you've entered the situation with pre-existing stuff in your head. Though that stuff, I like to refer to as thoughts. You know, just simple units of thought. Some researchers, cognitive scientists, will call them things like schemas. You know, say, oh, you got all these schemas in your head, or these archetypes, or whatever they want to call them. It doesn't matter. It's all hypothetical anyway. You know, it's these are terms that we're ascribing to theorize mechanisms that are in your brain. So I just keep it simple and say you got a whole bunch of thoughts saved up in your head. You know, some of those thoughts are going to be things like your values, your expectations, and your beliefs. These are all sorts of thoughts. You know, you might have a belief you have to be somewhere at a certain time of day, like say 9 o'clock. You know, say I believe I got to be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning. And in fact, that belief might be substantiated by other people in the world, right? There might be people out there who are expecting you to be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning. You know, there might be people who are paying you to be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning. You know, in fact, there might be people who have said, hey, you know what? You're not here at 9 o'clock in the morning. One more time, Megan, you're fired. All right. That might be a thing. So it might be a real belief, but I want you to understand it's still a belief. It's still this thought, this idea that exists in the back of your head and influences the way you perceive that situation when you enter it. All right. It's a belief. You also have expectations. I have an expectation. My expectation is when I get onto an interstate highway, I expect to be going really fast. You know, I expect to be able to drive at a very fast speed. And if that expectation is not met, you know, if I find myself going really slow in the interstate, well, that frustrates me because it counters my expectation. It challenges or creates, it threatens the way I view the world. So that's a form of threat. I also have values. in my head. And these are things that I've learned throughout my years. You know, these are things that have been instilled upon me through my parents and society and other institutions, whatever. But I value certain things in life. And one thing I value is I value being on time. I like being on time for things. I don't want people to have to wait for me, you know. And so having that value, that expectation, and that belief lead my brain to figure out this situation is actually threatening, when the reality is it's not so threatening. On the other hand, the bear, that's an actual threat. And your beliefs, your values, your expectations all factor into that. However, it's an actual threat. You know, I believe that this bear is going to kill me. It's probably going to kill me. I expect that if I get into a fight with this bear, I'm going to lose. You know, I value my life. I want to keep living it. You know, and so what I'm getting at is I want people to understand the role of your pre-existing thought processes, the way you are thinking when you encounter the stress. Now, if you encounter a stressor and you have all these sort of negative thoughts coming into play, those negative thoughts are going to lead your brain to interpret a situation as potentially stressing. And even if the situation is not threatening to you, like say traffic, or even if the situation is not actually a threat, your brain will interpret it as if it is, and it will react accordingly and get you all stressed. Humor. This is all a long, lengthy way to get back to humor. Humor is our brain's ability to see that situation, reanalyze that situation, and determine that it's not actually threatening. That was a huge summary. I'm sorry if I went a little fast. I apologize, Judy. I didn't see you there. And anyways, I just want to say thank you very much for having me. And cheers for Nerd Night.
Cheers. Thank you, Dr. King.